Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge. The co-host for today's program is Ambassador Tanveer Khaskheli, and our special guest today is Ambassador Zamir Akram. Sir, welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Zamir Akram, he joined the Foreign Service in 1978, and he has served in very important posts including Moscow, New Delhi, Washington. He has served twice, and at the UN, where he was also our permanent representative. Mr. Zamir Akram has dealt with key issues during his service, including Afghanistan, nuclear non-proliferation, arms control, human rights, and counter-terrorism. During his tenure as a permanent representative at Geneva, he was instrumental in promoting consensus on contentious resolutions regarding religious intolerance, freedom of religion, and freedom of expression. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be discussing with Ambassador Zamir Akram the December 18th decision of the US government to impose sanctions on 4 Pakistani companies, including National Development Complex, for what they say is the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and the means of delivery. These sanctions were imposed through an executive order. Now, let me remind our viewers that this is the 7th round of sanctions imposed by the US on Pakistan and also on Chinese firms since 2021. In September this year, the US imposed sanctions on 4 Chinese firms and a Pakistani firm. In April, US imposed sanctions on Belarusian companies and Chinese firms for transferring equipment to Pakistan for developing ballistic missiles. Now, according to Deputy National Security Advisor John Finner, candidly, it is hard for us to see Pakistan's actions as anything other than an emerging threat to the United States. He added, Pakistan will have the capability to strike targets well beyond South Asia, including in the United States. Now, the Foreign Office, Pakistan Foreign Office that is, has rejected these sanctions, and according to the spokesperson, Pakistan has made it abundantly clear that our strategic program and allied capabilities are solely meant to deter and thwart a clear and visible existential threat from our neighborhood and should not be perceived as a threat to any other country. Hence, any irrational assumption of a hostile intent from Pakistan by any other country, including the US, is perplexing as well as illogical. So, quite a strong, categorical and resolute statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is something which we are going to discuss with Ambassador Zamir Akram. Sir, once again, we are very happy and delighted and honored to have you with us at the Ambassador's Lounge.
Thank you.
So, my question is, why does the US view Pakistan's ballistic missile as a direct challenge to its security?
I think the US itself can answer that question, because I see no rational reason why the US should assume that Pakistan threatens the United States. And there are several reasons that are there, on the basis of which we can say that this American claim is ridiculous. It's totally ludicrous for the Americans to make such a claim. First and foremost, ever since Pakistan tested its nuclear weapons and announced its nuclear doctrine in 1998, we have made it clear, and we have repeated this consistently, that Pakistan's nuclear weapons and Pakistan's strategic program, including its delivery systems, are all meant to deter India. So, Pakistan's nuclear deterrence is exclusively against India. And we have said this repeatedly, that it is not meant to be used or deter any other country, first. Second, Pakistan has no dispute with the United States. We have in fact maintained very friendly relations with the US. More than 1 million Pakistanis live in the United States. And the third reason is that the United States itself has immense nuclear and missile capabilities. And compared to the American capability, Pakistan's capability is a drop in the ocean. It's like infinitely smaller than the capability of the United States. So, if we were to threaten the US, it would be suicidal for us to in any way threaten the US with our missiles or our nuclear weapons. So, this is a rational argument that the US has made in this statement, and this is an issue that has been going on now in talks for some time, and we have always repeatedly made this point to them. Now, as far as I can make my own assumption as to what is the reason, why are the Americans doing this, I think the reason is really to safeguard the interests of their strategic ally, which is India. The reason why they want to do that is because they want India to focus its capabilities entirely on China as so-called net security provider for the United States. And the US and India have, as you know, entered into a strategic partnership against India. So, the US wants India to focus exclusively on China and not be distracted by Pakistan. And I could assume that the Indians have probably even told them, because the fact is that the Indians, after the thrashing they have received from China in 1962, they have no inclination of threatening or being in any kind of conflict or confrontation with the Chinese. They are not ready to get another treatment that they did in 62. So, I imagine that they are trying to convince the Americans that, well, we can do more to help you against China and be more aggressive in our attitude towards China, so long as you can get Pakistan off our back, because we are now facing two front situation. We are confronting China and we are confronting Pakistan as well. And I think that's what really explains why the Americans are trying to use this excuse, this pretext, that you are threatening the United States, therefore you have to shut down your long-range missile program. Now, the question, let me preempt your question and say, why are we doing this, and why are we developing? Why do we develop? What is our position on this? So, first and foremost, as you know already, we have the Shaheen 2 and 3 missiles, which are they're not technically they're not long range, they're medium range. Shaheen 3 has a range of 2,750 kilometers. The purpose of Shaheen 3 is to basically bring into its range the entire landmass of India, plus some of its offshore assets like Andaman and Nicobar Islands. However, we also, looking at the future, it's possible that India may, with its development of its strategic capabilities, it already has a missile, for instance, with a range of 3,000 kilometers. Okay. So, India could, with its nuclear powered submarines, with possibility that it can gain some kind of naval bases in the Indian Ocean, and go beyond the range of Pakistani missiles. In that eventuality, if that happens, we may have to increase the range of our missile in order to ensure deterrence. So, at this time, we cannot foreclose our options because of what may happen in the future.
Right.
Right? So, that's one thing. The other thing is that this technology, developing missiles with longer ranges, is also the technology that is used to launch a satellite into space, a space launch vehicle. It's SLV, it's called, a space launch vehicle. So far, our satellites in space have been launched by China, but we would like to have an indigenous capability to do the same thing. And so, for that reason also, we need to develop this technology. And finally, on this issue, I can tell you that there are reasonable ways in addressing American concerns, and we have offered them in those ways. But unfortunately, they reject any kind of arrangement or understanding and continue to make these kind of ridiculous claims without any basis or any rationale.
So, I read a very thought-provoking article written by you today in the Tribune. Now, what we see now, a new discourse, US is developing a new discourse on Pakistan's nuclear and missile program. Is this going to be the trend in the future?
I'm afraid so. I think this is the most serious accusation that has been made by the United States in the entire history of our relationship. They may have accused us of many things, but this is for the first time that the United States is accusing us of potentially threatening the United States themselves. Now, this is a serious charge. And I think that we need to take this very seriously. And it is being made, incidentally, it's very interesting, the timing. Now, this Mr. John Feiner, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor, is going to be in office for a very short time because the Biden administration's term is coming to an end. And the next president is going to be Mr. Trump. Now, I think that this statement was made deliberately to hand over to the Trump administration this very difficult issue in terms of relations between the United States and Pakistan. And we have to remember that in the coming Trump administration, there are a number of people, in particular the designated Secretary of State, Mr. Marco Rubio, is very pro-Indian, is very anti-Chinese. Same is with the case with the incoming National Security Advisor, Mr. Pence, Mr. Waltz, Mike Waltz, is chairman of the India caucus in the US Congress. So, these are very pro-Indian, anti-Pakistan, anti-China individuals, and the Biden administration's attempt is to present to the incoming Trump administration an issue which goes against the very grain of what Trump is in favor of, and that is to secure the United States when he talks about make America great again or America first and all those things. So, obviously, the idea is that Trump will look at any country that is projected as threatening the US in a very negative sense, in a very negative way. So, we have to, this is going to be a difficult task going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. My question to you, sir, is as Imran has already, asked you interesting questions. A White House spokesman said Pakistan's long-range ballistic weapons capability could eventually strike targets outside of South Asia, across Middle East, including in the US. Do they have certain country in the Middle East, for example, Israel, in mind?
Of course. Yes, that is the country, obviously. This whole problem, look, I mean, I have dealt with this with Pakistan's nuclear problems and the nuclear program virtually throughout my career. In my view, there has been a discriminatory American approach towards Pakistan's nuclear program from the very beginning. If you remember, in 1974, India conducted its first nuclear test, and the United States, in response, adopted a number of legislative measures that threatened to impose sanctions on any country that tried to do the same thing. But against India, there was no action against India to roll back India's nuclear program. There was nothing done at that time. In fact, the supply of nuclear fuel for India's Tarapur reactor, which was diverted towards making a nuclear bomb, this was American fuel, which continued to be supplied.
Even after that?
Even after the test. So, and India continued to receive economic assistance, all those things. But the sanctions were to be applied against any other country that would try and achieve its a similar capability. And then, because we could not just sit back and do nothing, we started our own nuclear weapons program after the Indian test.
Yeah.
We came under American sanctions. There were the Symington sanctions, Solar sanctions, Glenn sanctions, and then finally the Pressler sanctions. So the whole slew of these sanctions were applied against Pakistan. So the question arises, why this discriminatory approach? And I'll tell you something else historically interesting. After the Chinese tested a nuclear weapon, the US, it's on record, the United States actively considered the option of helping India develop its own nuclear weapons. This is a matter of fact. So there is a discriminatory approach towards India. There is an approach towards India which tends to be supportive or at least not punitive, whereas there is a very clear-cut punitive discrimination against Pakistan with the imposition of sanctions and threats and all those kind of things. Question is why? Why this discrimination? And in my view, the reason is Israel. The US is concerned from the very beginning that Pakistan's nuclear capability can potentially be a threat for Israel. And we have made it again very clear, as I pointed out in response to the earlier question, that our doctrine is very clear. It is a capability that is meant to deter India. It's not meant to be used against any other country. And we made that clear time and time again. But these allegations from Washington continue to be raised.
Sir, you have raised, Tanveer has raised an excellent point. What we have seen during this Gaza crisis is that more than 45,000 people were killed in Gaza, the Palestinians. The Israelis were relentless in their bombing of the Gazans. They have destroyed the Gaza infrastructure, schools, colleges, universities. In Lebanon, they have done the same thing. And now, after Assad's downfall, they have virtually decimated a Syrian defense infrastructure. During all this process, US and the West, they were standing on the sideline. They were supporting the Israelis. Now, this statement coming from US regarding sanctions, could it be under pressure or pursuance of Israel?
They are on the same page. They have always been on the same page, and we have to assume that they are working hand in glove. So we cannot distinguish one from the other. I mean, I personally, if you ask me, I think the United States is being run by Israel rather than the other way around. If you look at the two political parties that run that country, both those political parties are kind of falling over each other, trying to be more pro-Israel than the other. Okay, so the American-Israeli lobby is very powerful. We know that. Everybody accepts that no one can get elected to any public office, including the office of the President of the United States, without the support of the Jewish lobby, without the support of the Jewish American lobby. So they are very powerful and they are working together. We have to assume that
could be one aspect of it. So, this gentleman John Feiner, he said Islamabad's conduct raised real questions about the aims of its ballistic missile program. So, is our program shifting towards broader ambitions with potentially global consequences?
No. Like I explained to you, we have to keep our options open because we cannot foresee how things will emerge in the future. But looking at present trends, we can see where things are going. And things are going in a sense, if you look at the Indian strategic program, it's very clear. They already possess medium, short range, medium range, long range, land based, air based, sea based missiles. They have a range much longer than ours. As I said, more than 3,000 kilometers. They are working on Prithvi 5 and 6, which will Agni 4, 5 and 6, which would actually their ambitions are to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile. But that's not our objective. We have no aspirations to become a global power. Our only objective is to ensure our own security by maintaining credible deterrence against our one enemy, and that is India.
So, coming from a diplomat rather, who has dealt with these issues for practically whole of his life, you are saying that our security threat perception, they remain the same, and that is India.
Absolutely, we have said this all along. That is the rationale for our program.
Right, sir.
Now, moving further, sir, how will Pakistan's development of long-range missile program affect the missile race with India? Will India not fast-track its missile initiative in ballistic missile defense systems?
As I said, India already has missiles which are of a much much longer range. And India's objectives are, of course, they want to target the Chinese. But the concern for us is two things, as I mentioned in my answer to the earlier question. One is the possibility that India will acquire bases in the Indian Ocean which would be beyond the range of our current Shaheen 3 missile
systems. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if they are, say, at a distance of, say, for example, somewhere in the Indian Ocean, I don't want to name a country, but they are trying to get some basing facilities with some countries that you know. If they are able to set up naval bases in those countries, and if they are beyond the current range of our missiles, but they have missiles of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 range, missiles from there, they can target us. Okay?
Even from those
areas. So we need to be able to respond
ready to counter,
that.
ready to counter.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be able to respond to that threat. That's okay. That's number one. Number two is that India, as you know, has two operational nuclear powered submarines, and nuclear powered submarines can go deep into the ocean and they can operate from there, and that again, those nuclear powered submarines can be equipped with long range missiles,
Weaponry.
and the Indians are developing submarine based long range missiles. So we need to be prepared for this eventuality. So
yes.
as I say, we cannot foreclose this option. We cannot say, okay, we are not going to develop this. We give you an assurance we are not going to develop any kind of these missiles. So that is the problem, that we have to keep our options open.
Yeah.
Depending on developments in technology, in capabilities, and policies, all those things are all variables.
So, US-India defense relations, they are going quite strong. Having agreements like basic exchange and cooperation agreement and communication compatibility and security agreement. Washington has also facilitated India's acquisition of advanced missile systems and defense technology. Now, what does this portend for the region?
Well, for one thing, it has already destabilized this region. Because when the Americans are building up India as a counterweight to China, the fact remains that these capabilities, these weapon systems that India has developed, they can be used against China, but they can also be used against Pakistan. There is no guarantee that the Indians will not use that against Pakistan. And if you actually look at the current deployment of Indian forces, its air force, its land forces, its missile deployments, its BMD, its ballistic missile defense forces, nearly 80% or more than that are focused on Pakistan, not on China. Less than 20%, less than 20% of their troops, of their forces are facing towards China. The rest is all facing to, majority is facing towards Pakistan. Even this S-400 missile that they recently acquired from Russians, that is here in Jalandhar. It's right across Indian Punjab. So it's not against China. So this is already very clear. And as I mentioned earlier on, the Indians don't have the backbone, in my view, to fight against the Chinese. China is far more stronger, far more capable, and the experience that the Indians have already had once.
And they know it.
And they, of course they know it. They don't want to have. Look, the Chinese were they were not even willing to, the Indians were not even willing to acknowledge that the Chinese were across the line of control which India claims in this Doklam sector of Ladakh. So the Indians were all hiding all this information from their own people because they are too scared to say that no, we can't stand up to the Chinese. So this is the
embarrassment for the government, sir, to accept that.
It's a total embarrassment for the government, and then after pleading with them, they have come up with some kind of an arrangement to de-escalate. But if the Americans think that if push comes to shove, if just a shouting match becomes a fighting match or a shooting match, then the Indians are not going to be on the side. They will not be with the Americans fighting the Chinese.
So Pakistan Foreign Office warned in a statement that the sanctions will have dangerous implications for strategic stability in our region and beyond. How will they alter regional geopolitics?
Okay, so I think sanctions, we need to be very clear about one thing. These American sanctions have zero impact on Pakistan's program.
Okay.
Because Pakistan has not been involved with the Americans in developing its missile program. So when the Americans imposed sanctions on Pakistani entities, and since from 98 to the present, almost more than 160 entities and individuals have been sanctioned by the US.
In the past.
And it's not just one, like they claim, one government entity. There are several government, Suparco and several others have been sanctions. But the net impact of these sanctions on our abilities and our program is, as I said, it's zero. No Pakistani individual or entity has any assets in the US. So if they freeze their,
Yes,
one of the sanctions, one of the impact of the sanction is to freeze their bank accounts or seize their property.
Any US company working with us.
So they neither have any bank accounts, nor do they have any property. There is no money. So what is the sanction is meaningless. So that is one thing. The other thing is the way it destabilizes, as the Foreign Office has said, is that it sends a signal to India that we are going, or that we are coming down very hard on Pakistan. In fact, now we are even saying that you are threatening us and your missile program is a threat to the United States. So it's sending a signal to the Indians that we can do whatever we want, because no such signal is going to India. It is, if the US is asking for restraint, it is restraint only from Pakistan, not from them.
Not from India.
So the Indians have been given a free pass. So that is why we say that this sends a very wrong message, and you are encouraging the Indians to become increasingly more belligerent and aggressive in their approach in dealing with Pakistan. So this is why you are destabilizing this entire region.
So, sir, this is the 7th round of such sanctions levied on Pakistan, including on China since 2001.
But on the other hand, instead of treating India equally as Pakistan, they are going ahead, as you mentioned, with all this different agreements. They have signed 4 so-called 4 foundational agreements for transfer of military technology, intelligence sharing, all sorts of different kinds of tactical and strategic cooperation. In addition to which, most recently, last year, they have signed an agreement on developing and inducting new and emerging technologies in weapon systems, plus developing cooperation in the military and civilian uses of outer space between the US and India. So now this is a new area, new areas, because there is no longer a competition in conventional and strategic nuclear missile issues. Now we are looking at India backed up by the Chinese, backed up by the Americans against China in the domain of space and in the domain of new and emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence and all these kind of things. So this is where the future of the competition lies, actually.
So, sir, keeping in view what you have just been telling and explaining us, these sanctions have been targeting not only Pakistan but Chinese companies. Are these sanctions not pushing us more towards China? And sir, how far will China be there for us as far as nuclear and ballistic missile program is concerned?
I think the relationship with China and Pakistan in the strategic domain is very strong. But it is, wrong on the part of the Americans and the Indians to think that Pakistan's missile program or its other aspects of its strategic program are China dependent.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, we have these, we have achieved sufficient capability for indigenous production, indigenous development, R&D, all these things. Many of the items on which they are claiming that they are, for which sanctions have been applied in the past and even now, these are dual use items. And you will be surprised to hear what kind of items are involved here. For instance, if we are buying tires for this it's a it's a truck on which the missile is loaded and it's fired from that truck. It's called a missile launcher. These are special trucks with special wheels, and those wheels are very big wheels. Now those are considered, the import of those wheels from China, for instance, are considered as proliferation. It's not, it's a dual use item. It's a tire. So I'm giving you an example. I mean, there's so many other kinds of things that are happening. So yes, the Pakistan-China relationship is very strong. It's very, as I said, very robust. It's multi-layered. It's very comprehensive. I think you must have read in the papers today, not papers, but on the Indians are very upset that we have concluded a deal with China for China to supply to us the advanced fighter aircraft, the J-35, and that is they are concerned that this is going to help Pakistan get an edge. So yes, the Chinese are ready to engage and to cooperate with us in the strategic domain, and that very much remains the part. And as in the case of Pakistan, so also in the case of India, these sanctions, so also in the case of China, these sanctions have no impact on Chinese companies.
So do you think that with Trump presidency coming, do you think these sanctions will become more severe? How far they affect us US-Pakistan relations as the new government or the new administration takes over?
Well, that will depend on how we deal with the incoming Trump administration. And the sooner we engage, even before they have come into the White House, the sooner we engage with them to, first and foremost, I think our primary concern or primary objective should be to convince the incoming administration that these accusations against Pakistan are false, that have been made by the Biden administration, and that we do not threaten the United States. We have no reason to threaten them. We have no dispute with the United States. That millions of Pakistanis live in the United States. Why should we try and jeopardize their security? Why should we jeopardize our own security?
No such record in the past, even nothing of that kind.
So there is no reasonable argument to be made, and I think that reasonable, objective Americans probably they also must find this very difficult to believe that why should Pakistan threaten us?
Of all the countries,
why should, I mean, Pakistan is not North Korea, So I think that the sooner we engage, the sooner we explain our position, the better it is. But I don't think that the relationship with the US is going to be a close relationship. I think the best we can do is manage our differences prevent any kind of, basically follow a policy of damage limitation and crisis management.
Keep them engaged,
Yeah.
basically.
So I don't think that we're going to be great big allies, but the idea should be to manage our relationship from escalating into some kind of
Difficult situation.
difficult or a confrontational position.
Right, so last question. You struck the nail on the head. You said Pakistan has neither the capability nor the desire to do such a thing, what they are saying, attacking Pakistan, or challenging US interests. But obviously they have made up their mind, and you have delved on the reasons why they have come up with such a statement or sanctions. Now, sir, they will work on this thing, and they will use the European allies, who are also our allies, our friends, to pressurize us to stopping this program. How ready are we to face the international pressure on our missile program?
Imran, do you know, look at the history of Pakistan's strategic program. When it has come to our national security, we have never compromised on it.
And should not.
And we will not, inshallah. I don't see any Pakistani leader being willing and able to compromise on this program. They won't last 24 hours in this country. That's
right,
my
sir.
view.
So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And this was our program. These recent sanctions by the US on Pakistan's missile program has raised concerns in Pakistan, and according to our Foreign Office, is indicative of double standards of US foreign policy. Now, while on one hand US is supplying advanced missile systems and weapon technology to India, which has substantially enhanced its military capability, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we are being sanctioned for developing our missile capability, ballistic missile capability, and as Ambassador Zamir Akram has said, that the purpose of this program is to deter India from attacking Pakistan. So this US policy, it creates a strategic imbalance in the region, and of course it would contribute to developing nuclear and missile arms race in the region. The rhetoric which is being given by the Americans, which is surrounding Pakistan's ballistic missile, it's because of many factors. The Chinese factor could be one, the Indian pressure could be one, and as Ambassador Zamir Akram said, Israeli factor could be another thing. So now there is this trend which is developing in the US policy. It's worrisome for Pakistan, because Mr. Trump is coming, and his cavalry which he has nominated, it includes a lot of gentlemen, a lot of people, aides who are strongly strongly pro-India and anti-China and anti-Pakistan. So while Pakistan has rejected these sanctions, the fact is that a troubled road lies ahead, and the best solution to this thing, if our leaders could develop an understanding among themselves and bring about peace and stability within the country, because without that we would not be able to resist the foreign pressures. Thank you for watching Ambassador's Lounge. Please subscribe to our channel, and do give your suggestions on how we can further improve our program. And we will be back next time. Thank you.